What's shaking, cocktail fans? I'm Modern Bar Cart CEO Eric Kozlik. It's my job to hit the road and seek out the best and brightest minds in the spirits and cocktail world and share their knowledge with you. This time around, I head to Waldorf, Maryland and catch up with my friend, barkeep Dan Marlowe, who's currently heading up the brand new tavern program at BlueDyer Distilling Co. During this conversation, we cover everything from port cask finished whiskey to the finer points of rum and coke. It was a great chat, and I can't wait to share it with you. So let's check it out. Dan, thanks for being on the podcast.
Yeah, Eric, absolutely. Thank you for coming down. That was a bit of a drive, but you timed it well, because sometimes it's 2 hours, sometimes it's 45 minutes. And
yeah, well, you know, I have a rule with DC. I don't drive like between the hours of like 7:30 a.m. and 10 a.m. and I don't drive between the hours of like 3 and 6 p.m.
And you know, it's a good rule to follow until you have somewhere you have to be.
Right. Yeah. And then you're like, okay, let's get some podcasts pulled up. So can you just introduce yourself to our listeners and give us a brief bio of who you are and what you're all about?
Yeah, absolutely.
First of all, wait, cheers.
Yeah.
Cheers to this. Cheers to you and your bio.
Okay.
Delicious. We'll talk about this in a minute.
Yeah, of course. Well, I'm Dan Marlowe. Some of you may actually know me as Fractions of Zero on Instagram, and that is a moniker. It's also a little bit of a social commentary. But for me, my moniker is an aspect of my personality. It's not a business per se. And beyond that, I'm a barkeep, I'm a dog dad, and I'm a soccer referee. More than that, you have to get to know me to find out. So
nice. Yes, your dog is awesome. He's been. I loved meeting him in the parking lot the other day. He was very friendly, and I'm a big dog guy. Oh, yeah. He's like a big dog, you know.
I've got nothing against the little dogs, but I don't seek them out. You know, one falls in my lap, I'll love them. But yeah, 45 pounds and up.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. So tell us how you got into the bar game itself.
Yeah. So there's a lot of ways to tell this story. It's kind of like I was blank, but then blank, and now blank. And we all have that story. For me, I've been service industry most of my life. I've done some retail, I've done manual labor, and then I've also done a lot of soccer officiating, which is a very unique industry to be in. But most importantly, I decided at a certain point that I wanted to bartend. I'd been a front of house, back of house. I'd done a little bit of everything. Fast food, sit down, and you get to a certain point where you just decide there's nothing left for you but jumping behind the bar. And so you learn how to do it one way or the other. And then you do it. And so for me, I was a bartender, and it was a skill set, and it was something I could travel with and use, but it was just that. I was just a bartender and nothing more. And then something happened, some things happened. We all go through stuff in life that either motivates us or discourages us, or sets us on different paths. And part of what happened, we'll highlight on the good stuff that happened, because the bad stuff's not podcast material. My boss asked me one day to stop making smoked cocktails, because that's all we were doing was making smoked cocktails, smoking this, smoking that. And so he said, do me a favor, go make something new, something different, and the only rule I have for you is that it can't be smoked. So I did some research, I did some reading. I kind of like, for my first time jumping on Imbibe, and I found a recipe for a maple gin flip. Whoa. And I had to do it. I just had to. So I went and I got the ingredients. I got permission from my boss to get the ingredients. It was the first time I'd ever done it. The idea of using a whole egg, like, I wasn't squeamish to it because I love bloody steaks and raw egg. This is not going to bother me at all, but I hadn't heard of it. So I tried it. I made it. I think I used Baltimore Spirits Company Shot Tower Gin. And then organic, pure Vermont maple syrup. And whole cream and a whole egg. I didn't know about the use of beer back then, and this particular recipe didn't call for the dark beer. But I made it, did some ground nutmeg on top, and the whole kitchen staff, because it was late at night, the whole kitchen staff and the 2 bar staff that were still there, we all tried it, and our minds were blown. It was delicious. And from that day forward, I have not looked backwards, not only in regard to the culinary aspect of cocktails themselves, but from flips as well. And it's a love that I've come to find in common with a few other friends and associates, one of the owners of BlueDyer is a huge fan of flips and the history thereof. So that is what got the ball rolling. And now we go to the and now blank. I'm what I like to consider a barkeep. And for me, it's a personal differentiation between a bartender and a barkeep. We've sometimes used the words bar chef, mixologist, and different people throughout recent history have coined those terms for a bartender. I like barkeep, and to me, I grew up gardening. So if you tend a garden, you probably just show up, weed it, go home. If you keep a garden, you set it up, you plant everything, you weed it, you harvest it, you build the fences, you scare off the predators, you take pride in what you do, and you're there from beginning to end. So I see the difference between the two as a similar aspect. If you're tending a bar, you're coming in, you're bartending, and you're going home. If you're keeping the bar, there's a little bit more pride and a little bit more overall involvement. I got some buddies who tease me for calling myself a barkeep, but I'm sure Dale DeGroff had plenty of folks who teased him for calling himself a mixologist. So.
That is probably very true. I love flips. They're, for people who've never had one, it's one of those like mind-blowing moments, because when you throw alcohol into a mix with cream or dairy of any type, and then like a whole egg, you've just got this like crazy gradient of fats, proteins, and then like weird flavor compounds. Like, and you're talking about using a gin. There's botanicals in there.
Yeah.
So it's it's just not done.
And a high proof alcohol is going to inherently start breaking down fats and proteins too. So like the drink itself shouldn't work, but it does. And obviously there's different histories of it, and it started with different ingredients and very specific ones and for very specific reasons. But ever since it's now become a very classy drink served up in a martini glass. It started in a frickin' tanker.
Yeah, exactly.
With some stale beer and some rum,
and then you put a hot ass burning tong into it.
So that you could curdle it and make sure everything was dead and mixed, like, because you're getting the milk from the goat or the cow on the ship, and you were lucky to have the egg, but it was your one egg is your ration. You got your rum ration, and then there's some stale beer. Like they just threw it all together, and there's different histories to it, and some, obviously like any other spirit related history, there's disputes on the history, but
sure.
What it comes down to is we have history to follow and to learn from, but like all of these cocktails, it's like music. There's no right, there's no wrong. There's history, but they're not. How do I put this? They don't stand apart from each other.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and it's not a straight line. Was it? I think Mark Twain said this, and he's quoted as saying, "I think everything that's ever been said." Yeah. So this might be apocryphal, but I don't think it is, because this actually sounds true to him. He's like, history doesn't repeat itself, but it echoes. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. So that was Twain. You got that one.
Yeah, and so I see a lot of that happening in the bar industry, right? It's like there's, depending on where you are and who you're with, chances are whatever fascination is in vogue at that time in either the city or whatever size of zeitgeist you might be examining at the moment, there's probably something that was popular like far back beyond memory, and we're kind of digging this stuff up and resurrecting. I mean, it's kind of what we do as bartenders. We work with spirits.
Of course.
And sometimes those are the spirits in the bottles, and sometimes it's the spirits of the drunk ancestors before us.
What's interesting is in the age that we're in, with the record-keeping abilities we have now, it's almost impossible to forget what's been done. You can be naive to it, but if you actually look it up, it's usually there. And so it's really interesting, because for hundreds, if not thousands of years of our history, it was, if you didn't hear it from the village elder or your friend or the historian or in school, like you weren't going to know and you couldn't know. So it's a very different world for that. But should we talk about what we're sipping on?
Yeah, I would like to do that. So we found out that we had a common media fascination. I call it fascination, fanhood. We both are into the Trailer Park Boys.
Well, who's not a fan of watching Jim Leahy make a fool of himself? Because here's the thing, the liquor talks to all of us. It's just a matter of whether you listen.
That's right.
So, cheers to that.
Cheers, Bo Bandy.
Now, rum and Coke being Julian's drink of choice that never leaves his hand.
Right. So I'll give the 15-second Cliff Notes version of this show. It's a show. Is it Nova Scotia?
Yeah.
I believe it's set in Nova Scotia. And it started back in the early 2000s, right? Maybe even late 90s.
I think it was 2000s, but yeah, it was kind of a cult show that was meant to almost be a joke.